After 3.5 years, I was a registered nurse and midwife, but I knew I didn't want to work in hospitals. All I'd wanted to do was finish my training, get my qualification so I could leave. I spent a little bit of time as a registered nurse in the hospital, which is where I did the whole top cardex thing. And it was an interesting time because running a ward is no easy feat. You've got patients, you've got doctors, you've got nurses you've got to manage, you've got to try and get their care done, and you're faced with a whole lot of different things. And I love doing the top cardex, creating that system, achieving that. But it was when I was doing temporary nursing and I was asked to go and look after an occupational health clinic while that nurse went on maternity leave, and I fell in love with it. I was an independent practitioner. I ran my own clinic, I saw my own patients, I did my own stores, my own ordering. I had the doctor come in once a week and I could manage it, and I absolutely loved it. Now, the things I learned there was you need to strategize your time, because the demands of the people was that they needed basic healthcare for their ailments. Now, working in Africa, where healthcare is not as readily available, health knowledge is not nearly as high as in the advanced or developed world, people demand it of you as the nurse and say, but you've got to help me. But what an occupational health nurse actually does is make sure that they are not being damaged by their work. It's not about coughs and colds. It's about saying you're working with certain chemicals, or you're doing repetitive strains or repetitive work that could give you repetitive strain injuries. I need to monitor you legally at very distinct periods, very clear tests, to make sure that not only are you not affected, but if there is a problem, that we deal with it appropriately. So there were huge demands on my time legally and ethically, but socially I was being pushed. So I had to come up with a solution, and eventually I came up with one. Whether it really worked or not, it made me acknowledge, recognize each demand, whether it's a social or a legal one, and set aside time appropriately. So I started doing clinics first thing in the morning for the people coming in who wanted to be seen for their coughs and colds. Then I realized, I need to divide it up into those with short-term immediate problems and those with the more chronic longer-term problems who weren't so urgent. And I set aside the first 4 appointments for urgent emergency cases. What was interesting, nobody came anymore for those. They preferred banging on my door and milling around outside, having a chat with everyone, seeing everybody. They didn't want to come individually. So I almost divided and conquered by acknowledging their problem, giving them appropriate time. Then the inappropriate use of my time started falling away. Because when they had to go to their manager to say, I need an appointment with a nurse, and he had to phone, suddenly they had to be responsible for the time, where before they could just disappear and say, no, I'm sick. So that was quite an interesting one where I realized, whoa, I can change this. But it caused a lot of problems because people wanted to be milling around having a chat. They didn't want to be managed appropriately. But the learning to use time, chunks of time, has been invaluable, and I still do that. I will set aside chunks of time, but now what I do, because I work for myself and I can do things the way I want it, I will rotate time. And I will, for instance, do dictating books, cooking, and housekeeping. And I will rotate those in 25-minute segments or in chunks that are suitable. So dictate a chapter, go and sort out the kitchen ready for cooking. Come back, dictate another chapter, go and tidy the house, run the Hoover over the vacuum before my partner comes home and wonders what I've been doing all day. Now, those times are actually called Pomodoros. That is a system that was developed, and it basically says, give yourself 25 minutes. Allocate a task in that, and I would strongly recommend a goal. Say, I'm going to dictate 1 chapter. Make sure that you're all set up. Make sure that you're only focusing on that in the 25 minutes. For instance, earlier when I started, I'm standing here at my window, and who should arrive at the door but the neighbor's dog, who was going to scratch on the door and was going, sorry, the phone was moving. He was going to scratch on the door and whine. So I stopped that video, went outside, got him in, which he was quite happy with because it's cold and miserable outside. It's Aberdeen winter, and we've just had freezing point last night. So set aside the time, clear your desk of everything else, and if you're like me and quite a cluttered person where you have everything out all at once, you can actually set up different workspaces. For instance, I said to you, I'm doing dictating, I'm doing cooking, and I'm doing vacuuming. Those are in completely different places. So when I go there, I know, right, all I'm doing here is the vacuuming, or all I'm doing is tidying the kitchen, or all I'm doing is dictating. And this gives you a better layout of your time and gives you what's called the unwritten rules. That's something I learned on my MBA, which really struck a chord, was make sure it's clear to you, without anything being said, what it is you're supposed to be doing. So I do rotating tasks, 20 tasks, 25 minutes each, with a 5-minute break to give you the changeover. You can then have a 15-minute break in which you go to the loo, make yourself a cup of coffee, think about what you're going to do next, see how well you did. Now, another thing that I learnt in running my own clinic was 5-minute tasks. Often you don't have a lot of time, or you've had to deal with things and you come back and your mind is not ready yet to go into things. So just pick a 5-minute task heading in the right direction. I love the phrase getting lost in the right direction, because all you're doing is saying, oh, I need to be looking at tests. I know that blood test. Let me go and see if I've got the blood tubes. Have I got the list of people I need to see? Have I set a date? Did I send out that email? Just go and do one little 5-minute task. It might not be the most appropriate one. It might not be the most urgent one, but you can at least get lost in the right direction by doing a 5-minute task. And today, it's actually my birthday. And I'm sort of thinking, here I am, 58, what have I achieved? Feeling quite down on myself. So I took the dog for a walk, not for too long, but we went for a walk, cleared my head, came back, and I thought, I'm going to do these tapings. I've been saying I'm going to do it, and I'm doing it right now. And all I did was set up my laptop, get my phone out, make a few notes about how I'm going to lay it out, and I've started. I might throw this away. I might not. But here I have the 5-minute tasks within the Pomodoro of 25 minutes. What I sometimes do is I set up something called a power hour, and I do 5-minute tasks in that, because you can spend an hour and really not achieve much. You could be busy like doing emails. So what I might do is set up a 5-minute timer within my power hour, and if it's an administrative one, I might do my emails, but I'll say I've got to do 2 emails in the 5 minutes, and I can hear this little ticking clock reminding me, stay on track, go and do that. And I found I get far better, especially with things I don't want to do. The other thing that I learned and practiced in the occupational health field where I was running my own clinic. You're in a business setting, but you're support, and you're very much pushed by the social needs of the people rather than by the legal needs which you have to comply with. So that juggling act can be quite difficult. So I learned a few things. Number one, you're dealing with a lot of things. Get yourself a very clear system. And I got clipboards, hung them up on hooks and labeled them. So for instance, the clinic appointments, they were up there. So if somebody phoned and said they want an appointment, I just took the appropriate clipboard, wrote it in, put it back on the hook. Done deal. I don't have to scrabble through my computer. I don't have to scrabble through my desk. It's all there. And if somebody came to the door, my assistant could help them. Audiometry tests. We would set up when they will be done because you needed it to be quiet, and my assistant, I'd had her qualified to do them, and she would then be able to do them. And we'd set up times and say, you can do 2 a day between these times. So when somebody needed to be done, they'd phone up and say, look, I've got to get my audio test done. I'd say, great, the next appointment we have is this. Discuss it, put them in, done deal. And that I found very useful for a whole lot of disparate tasks that are very clear, but you can't do it all in one book or one page. You've really got to think it through. And you also want to finish the job, as in make that appointment, not receive it and think, I've got to get back to this person. You can get back to them immediately and say, here it is, that's what I can offer you. So having all your different tasks laid out. And it might seem like a lot if you've got 5 or 6 or 7 clipboards laid out with different things. But on the other hand, it's clear, everyone can see it. It's in your mind's eye that you can see it. And I found I could help people immediately. Instead of that, I've got to get back to them. Because that I've got to get back to them is a killer. It killed me initially until I worked out that system. The other one that I worked out was teaching people to do things. And I can only do that if it's clear in my mind what it is that needs to be done. Now, this does go back a little bit to the problem-orientated nursing record, in that you learn to focus on the need, the problem or the need, and you then mull over how we're going to tackle this. So, for instance, I had to produce statistics, but from paper to that could be quite hard. So I set up a system, did a macro, and got my assistant. I wrote down every single step, wrote it out well, then I'd sit with her and she would follow the steps. And I could see, yes, the steps I have given her is achieving what I want. But until I was clear in my mind how I was going to do it and what needed to be done, I couldn't delegate it. And if I didn't give her what's called a standard operating system or a routine or a ritual, she wasn't going to be able to do it. And I wanted her to be comfortable doing it. So focusing on what needs to be done, working out a routine to do it, writing it up step by step so that you know it's done properly, and then teaching someone else with the notes is a wonderful way to get so much done. So those were the things that I learned working for myself, was trying to get things done, because what I was really trying to do was create space for me to strategize on one level, sort of a helicopter view, while doing operational stuff and admin stuff at the same time, which are basically ant and bear level. They're higher above the ground, but not nearly as high as helicopter. But while you're bogged down with lots of paper and things you need to get back to and decisions that need to be made and stats that need to go out, you're going to struggle to do your strategic stuff. So I realized I need to create time so that I can do these things. And blocking off time, setting pomodoros, setting schedules created this for me, and it gave me a lot more space. I think you do need to be quite mature and disciplined to be able to do this. For me, it was quite a problem initially, but as I've got older, it's become easier because I set off in the right direction. I got lost in the right direction.